Welcome everyone to the Feminine Outliers podcast, your dose of fun, life advice, and experiences from two African professional women living and working in the Western world. We are your hosts, Zelda Wasau
and Cholwe Mandona.
And we are excited to have you here with us. So welcome back to another episode. This week, as you can see from the title of this episode, we are talking about emotional intelligence. And if you have listened to some of our other episodes, you probably know that it hints there that this is something we're both very passionate about.
Yes.
/ can rant a lot about.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to dive deep into, emotional intelligence and how, it's impacted our lives. But as per usual, we are going to start with our unlearning segments. So um, I will go ahead and start with what I have been unlearning this week. So I've been unlearning feeling guilty for putting myself first, or for maybe you can quote unquote say being a bit selfish, but I would probably say just for putting myself first. Because I am someone who in the past would always think about others. Like, I always try to think, oh, how would someone else feel? And I guess it's part of being an empath. I'd be like, oh, how does so and so feel? And then you try to accommodate their feelings, their reactions, and all that stuff. And you kind of put yours on the back burner because you're thinking about others before you think about yourself. And it's a very noble character, but it's not smart. Like, there's times in life in which, yes, you can put others before yourself. There are times it will be necessary, but there's also a lot of times it's not necessary. Because one of the things I came to learn in life is that people really do think of themselves first. And so if you're one of those people who doesn't, you're easily going to be knocked down or taken advantage of or something, because you easily just put others' needs before your own. And sometimes when I do that, whether it's saying no to a certain request or not going somewhere, I feel guilty because I'm like, oh, I feel bad for saying no to that person. But if that puts me in the best scenario possible, or if it's what works best for me, I just do it. Because, for example, I told Chole earlier about this week. It's just been I'm working basically for the past 2 weeks. I've been working 12 out of the 14 days.
Wow.
And these are my only 2 days off, today and tomorrow.
Wow.
And then there's a wedding coming up. And, I did mention that they wanted some help in the wedding, but I'm like, I only have 2 days off. And I need this time to myself because, one, I need to rest. Two, I need to clean. I need to do all the stuff I need to do. I need to cook for when I go back to work. Realistically speaking, like, I just need to recover because I've just come from a 9-day shift. And I kind of felt guilty. But then I realized, no, you know what's best for yourself, and you just have to do what's best for you, because you have to work at your optimal. And I can't go to the hospital on Saturday and I'm like exhausted, not able to think because I wasn't able to say no when I'm doing too much. So I just learned, honestly, to introspect and really be like, if this is the best choice for me, then this is what I'm going to do. So yeah, and not to feel guilty about it.
Nice one. That's great. That's great, Zel. I empathize with you on this because just what you said, 12 days, 12 out of the 14 days you have been working. And mind you, that is 12 hours a day. That is a lot. That is a lot. And then just the kind of work that you have to do on a daily basis is intense. And I think it can be very stressful on your body, on your mind. Because I know sometimes when you have spoken with me, sometimes your patients die, and then
Mhm.
I don't know if any human being is immune to that feeling of death, because it's sad. It's something that just, I don't know, it puts you in a situation where you are just not in the most positive state. So I absolutely agree that you need to look after yourself, and that you're not feeling guilty about that. Um, and there's something that you said that I'm actually thinking we need to do a podcast on this. You mentioned being an empath, and the other thing that I was thinking about was also, like, for example, my Christian upbringing. The combination of those
Mhm.
two parts of myself, I think, growing up and not being aware of how to apply that noble character has just led to that idea of serving others instead of serving myself. And so
Mhm.
I think we need to sort of talk about how, where does this noble character, where do we apply it, um and so that we don't struggle, or so that we can sort of educate ourselves and then educate our listeners on how people can give, but give in an appropriate way that does not, lead us to sacrificing ourselves um in a unhealthy way. So yeah, that,
Mhm.
I think that those are some things to look into, how, because I used to think it was just so natural to serve others.
Right.
And yeah, and it was like, yeah, and that was the norm, but then I didn't think about myself in a way that was like, this, it's healthy to look after yourself first, and then you can serve others. So i
Mhm.
i, I agree with you on this one.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
That's true, 100%. Yeah, you cannot pour from an empty cup, and it's something to do with emotions. So
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So good unlearning for this topic of the week. So nice one.
What are
S-
you unlearning?
Um, yeah, I thought you would never ask, but it's it's actually similar. It's also an emotion related unlearning, and it is. I have to actually read it out because otherwise I was not going to say it right in the right way. But I am unlearning hiding my true feelings, because I'm fearing rejection or disappointment or anger or whatever other negative emotion I can imagine. So, um, because just like you were saying, if being an empath as well, when I think about another person's emotions and I am thinking about their reaction first instead of my own attitude and emotions towards something, um, I'm trying to avoid them being disappointed or them turning away from me because I've said no or I haven't given them an answer that is aligned with what they were expecting. Um, and I'm just like, why am I doing that? Because my emotions are speaking out and saying, no, this is not something you agree with. It's not, it's not just being true to myself. And learning that to say, don't hide your feelings, your true feelings. Because the person that respects and understands the way I think about things, or just myself, will not actually be I don't know what the word is, will not turn away from me. They will understand. They might even be disappointed, but it's not the end of the world. And it's just something where we've just found a moment where there's misalignment, there's a disagreement, and that's it. It's just a moment. It's not so catastrophic that it ends a friendship, that kind of thing. So yeah, I've just realized that I'll I will say what my feelings are or my emotions towards something, and I'll just let the chips fall where they will fall.
Mm, hashtag maturity.
Yes,
Because you have to
yes.
be mature enough to do that, like, and just you know accept the consequences of letting the chips fall where they fall, and not hiding your true emotions. But I mean, that's that's literally the when you hear people who feel free, um or who feel like they're living in their true selves, that's part
Mm,
of the process. It's just
mm,
learning to accept it for what it is. So,
yeah.
like in your case, you're like, I just have to be honest with my feelings, knowing
Mm-hmm.
that it might upset someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And upsetting someone else might have consequences that I don't necessarily desire, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm still going to go ahead with it because that I just have to be true to myself. And ultimately speaking, even
Mm,
if you lose someone because you're being true to yourself, have you really lost much? Because in a sense, it might just have been something or someone that doesn't work for you. And ultimately, you might
mm,
just open the door for better and more out there because now you
mm-hmm.
have it kind of like has weeded out something you don't need in life. So
Yeah.
you always hear, I mean, because we both listen to a lot of these um like we listen to a lot of podcasts and read books and stuff. When people take that step to really just being their true selves, it's definitely hard initially, but then it's more beneficial in the end because you just feel like you don't have to hide behind a veil and
Mm-hmm.
be ashamed of your true feelings, because I mean your feelings are valid. And also when you talk about what you're feeling, you might realize that maybe I was misguided in how I was thinking, and it might actually
Mm-hmm.
have a more give you a positive outlook. So I like that. it's
Yeah.
it's we're already tapping into emotional intelligence in our unlearnings in various ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's such a big deal. And I think our experiences so far are just leading to this same concept. It's like, yeah, I know. It's exciting.
Exactly. Okay. Okay. So, um, I'm really excited to get back to uh, our deep thinking topics. What did we talk about last week? I think we had a fun few topics,
Last week, um,
but
we were talking about, was it built in generational wealth?
that was kind of fun. I liked that. That was fun. Oh, and then there was also the previous week was the what would you do? Um,
What would you do? Oh, you mean please stop doing that?
oh my goodness. Yeah, please stop doing that. And, and that,
Where was there? Where are we? Just so you know, planet Earth is here. We're not yet in Mars.
what would you do? We should do an episode on what would you do.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I guess now we're really tapping into some deep personal stuff that affects every one of us. So, you know, as per usual, I always start with what is like what does it mean? And so what does intelligence mean? What is the definition of emotional intelligence?
Mm.
And our handy dandy internet gives me a good description. And emotional
Okay.
intelligence is the ability to perceive, interpret, demonstrate, control, evaluate, and use emotions to communicate with and relate to others effectively and constructively.
Mm.
This ability to express and control emotions is essential, but so is the ability to understand, interpret, and respond to the emotions of others. And
Yes.
some experts actually suggest that emotional intelligence is more important than IQ for success in life.
That. Whew. Ugh.
So,
This is just, as you are speaking, I'm just melting in those words because, girl, you know how much I love this topic. Ugh. Yes.
I think it's a topic that we both are passionate about, and it's like a pet peeve for both of us because I
Yes.
mean, I think we would both describe ourselves as emotionally intelligent. Um, I don't think I started out that way, but I think
Yep.
the more I grew and really was working on self awareness, growing as a person, emotional intelligence was one of those things
That's true.
um,
Yeah.
that came to. And you also realize certain things as you read books and you compare it with your reaction, with your interactions with others. You realize, yeah, this is so true. That this is important to be able to move on and to succeed in life. And for me, emotional intelligence, like the biggest place it has affected me is work.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
because I have mentioned this in previous episodes as well. When people are sick or in the hospital, that's where all things go flying out of the window. It's
Mm.
like reason, your brain, it just goes flying out of the window.
Mm.
And emotions just really get out of control and stuff like that. And I have said multiple times, it is not my job as your doctor to control your emotions. Like it's not my job. And if it's making it hard for me to do my work, then it becomes an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way it's saying this, it's like they have to be aware of their own emotions, what
Mm-hmm.
they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing. And also, I have to be aware of how to control my own emotions in response to what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like it's a two-way street, but it's also not just controlling. You can't control someone else's emotions, but you can control how you react to it.
Yeah.
So this is essentially, the gist of emotional intelligence. And I think it
Mm-hmm.
goes hand in hand with, you know, someone who's self aware, self confident, self accepted, because you have to have a certain level of all of that to also be emotionally intelligent. So that's just
Mm.
like breaking ground. Do you have any initiating thoughts on that?
Wow. Where do I even start from? Um, does what you just said around someone needs to be aware of their emotions. Um, and yeah, I was just what came to my mind when you said that was how people and I probably have done this in the past is when someone says I just am who I am, this is how I am, this is how I react to things. And so they the fact that we are talking about it, you know, we're saying emotional intelligence, it means something that you can acquire, like it's a skill. And
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say that initially I did not think that way. It was just I reacted to things just according to how I saw things. Like, and it was just like it felt, because emotions come up so quickly when something happens in an event. If someone accused me of something, it's just the emotion of anger just comes up so quickly. For example, it's like, whoa, where did that come from? And
Mm-hmm.
so I was just thinking about that, like, wow, I would never have known that I had control over that emotion. um and I'm glad to be even talking about it, like talking about emotions like this. um so yeah, that's the first thing that came to my mind. And I was also just thinking about how emotions cloud our judgment, and they give us
Mm-hmm.
the reality of how things are. um and and it's interesting how people would then think everybody else is experiencing exactly what they're experiencing. um uh,
Right.
which is not true. um and then, some people even go to the extent of being angry, uh or being upset when the person next to them is not having the exact same emotion as them, even to the same stimulus or to the same thing that they're seeing or experiencing. So,
Mm-hmm.
but you are right. I think you made a statement around how you quoted somebody who said emotional intelligence may be more important than IQ, which I absolutely agree on that.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, and a very deep one to think about because yeah, and I feel like someone who considers herself to be emotionally intelligent, it can honestly be a burden because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I feel like we deal with a lot of people who don't have emotional intelligence. And
Mm,
so you kind of have to take the high road and realize, they're not really that emotionally intelligent, and you that will dictate also how you respond to things.
yeah.
Because
And
there's, go ahead.
I was going to say, maybe for our listeners, them, because, we are regarding ourselves as highly, as emotionally intelligent, rather. Perhaps it would be maybe a good thing to talk about what exactly is that. Like, it's because it's not vocabulary. It's like, what does that mean to say that someone is emotionally intelligent?
So ideally, there are four components of emotional intelligence.
Mm,
There's perceiving emotions, reasoning with emotions, understanding emotions, and managing your emotions.
mm-hmm.
So perceiving emotions is the first step in understanding um, emotions in general. In many cases, this might involve understanding nonverbal signals such as body language and facial expressions. So you have to understand, like, what are your triggers to, or what made you perceive this emotion like this, or perceive something like that that leads you
Mm-hmm.
to having this emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because you said like someone says something angrily to you, and you like your response to that. So like, why are you responding like that? Because you're perceiving that this person says something angrily to you, and you're reacting to that.
Mm-hmm.
That's step one. Step two is reasoning with your emotions. So it's basically promoting thinking and cognitive activity. Emotions help us to prioritize what we pay attention and react to, and we
Mm-hmm.
respond emotionally to these things to garner our attention. So reasoning. So okay, fine. I perceive that someone has said something hostile to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I also am feeling hostile towards them. Why am I feeling hostile towards them? Because they've reacted angrily to me. This is why I
Mhm.
feel like this, or because they say this and this about me, this is why this is happening. So
Mhm.
that is part of understanding your emotion as well, in which,
Mhm.
the emotions we perceive can carry a wide variety of meanings. So if someone is expressing angry emotions, the observer must interpret the cause of the person's anger and what it could mean.
Mm.
Um, and they give an example here, like, for example, if your boss is acting angry, it might mean they're dissatisfied with your work. Or it could
Mhm.
be they got a speeding ticket on their way to work that morning and they're
Mhm.
just projecting onto you. So,
Yeah.
like, you also have to, like, understand why, you know, why are we coming? Why is it coming through? And
Mhm.
reasoning and understanding emotions, I think they go hand in hand and can kind of be very similar or the same things at times from my in my understanding.
Mhm.
Um, because you're like really trying to figure out why is this the reaction, what's the trigger behind this. And then the
Mhm.
fourth step, which is very important also, is managing your emotions. So the ability to
Mhm.
manage emotions effectively is a crucial part of emotional intelligence at its highest level. Regulating
Mm.
emotions and responding appropriately, as well as responding to the emotions of others, are all important aspects of emotional management. So essentially, I'm saying I think we generally do a good job at those four things. And I think
Mhm.
it's because we're introspective. And these
Yeah.
things also require you to take a step back
Exactly.
and pause before you actually respond.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sometimes, like, it's like, okay, this is happening in the moment. Let me give myself 5 seconds or so. Just think through this before you respond or you react. Because, like,
Mhm.
for me, like at work, like if a patient's family is reacting angrily, they're mad that this has not been done for the patient, this has not been done, or this isn't that. And in my head, I know that it makes no sense to do this or that because it's not going to change the outcome of the patient.
Mhm.
But then they're coming from a place of frustration because they love their loved one who's sick in the
Mhm.
hospital.
Mhm.
That's their driving force. So for me to reason with that and understand that that's where the emotions are coming from can also help me know how to respond, because they're not
Mhm.
necessarily trying to be hostile and mean and angry. They're coming
Mhm.
from a place of frustration. So if I can tackle the root cause of it and respond with cool, calm demeanor and be like, no, we don't do this and that. This is how we do things.
Mhm.
That really helps with me responding to them properly. So I'm also managing my own emotions after thinking through this is probably where they're coming from.
Mhm.
Sometimes it fails and we act out as well and just try to
Yeah.
put people in their places, because sometimes it's hard. Like, people just can't handle their emotions and let them go out of control, and you kind of have to put them in their places. But I think it's just a whole it's a huge part of life, and it happens every day in all different scenarios. Like, in my
Mhm.
head, I'm just like, can't you just control, like, or like if you get cut off in traffic, do you have to get so mad? Like, maybe you follow the person honking at them or something like that. Like,
Mm.
why?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing you said it rightly, Zell, about it's allowing ourselves to have that processing time and not immediately reacting to it, to whatever is coming at us, and then deciding, and also we understand that that emotion is coming from the other person. So I was out here living my best life, drinking my water, and then all of a sudden I'm being accused of something. So then it's kind of been like, wait, uh I know, like, so as you said, like, if you know yourself and you're like, okay, right now I have happy emotions, and then this person is coming to accuse me of something, then I'm now trying to understand where are they coming from, and thinking through that, is what they're saying actually accurate, and if it's not, it's almost like maintaining the same emotions that I had without reacting and just sort of going into it. um
Hmm.
and so I think it's just allowing that processing time to see what the situation, what's really going on. But I think because emotions are somewhat contagious, if you don't allow yourself to have that processing time, that thinking time, it's almost instantaneous. Like somebody angry will want to make you angry. Somebody who's laughing and smiling or happy. Like for example, I am one person who almost laughs when I see like a laughing video, like on social media, like whether it's a baby or someone starts laughing. Like I start laughing as well. It's just so funny.
It's contagious. You're already picturing it in your mind. You're like,
Exactly. And I'm just like, why am I laughing at people laughing? It's so funny. Um, yeah, and but then I also came to realize, funny thing about this, I also came to realize that I've definitely grown emotionally is when someone is ranting on social media, and then I'm just like, I have no emotions towards that. I'm just like, why are they shouting? And why are they speaking like that? And like, I just have no emotions towards it. And I'm just like, okay, I've created that distance between me and them. But I'm sure in their minds, they want everyone to understand how angry they are. So yeah, it's, yeah. So I just wanted to agree with you, on the processing of it. You did say something actually on emotional management about the appropriate ways to respond, because I think that's another part of emotional intelligence.
mhm,
Like, what are the appropriate ways to respond? Um, and one example that I had to unlearn for myself when it comes to how to respond to, if somebody, if I was upset with someone, or I don't know, let's say I got into conflict with a friend or a family member, um, like giving them the silent treatment. I'm just like, honestly,
mhm,
if I learned about emotional intelligence very early in my life, I think like silent treatment is just, I don't know if I want to say it's the worst way of responding, but it's such a common way to deal with people we are unhappy about. But
mm,
it doesn't resolve things in the best
mhm,
way. And I don't know if I already said this in the previous episode, that I was unlearning silent treatment, but I just don't see it as a beneficial way to deal with situations. And instead, I think, as I spoke about in the unlearning, is expressing your true feelings and letting the chips fall where they fall, and having to accept the result even before you have that conversation, potential result rather, and just dealing with it right from the start, but not skirting around it, or not trying to be passive aggressive, because there are ways that people react that just makes it even worse, or doesn't really is not an effective way of dealing with the situation at hand.
yeah. I mean, I think it's funny because I feel like um, some people might think silent treatment is emotionally intelligent. Like you're not acting out; you're just like keep it quiet. And so, I mean, it might be better than acting a fool or like really getting mad and blowing up, but
Mm,
like it's still not a smart thing to do because I feel like if you need time to yourself to process the emotions, think about what's happened, just tell
mhm,
someone, I need time to think. Let's address
mhm,
this. Please let's address this later on. instead of giving someone a silent treatment, which during the silent treatment you're probably thinking through everything that happened anyways, but
Mhm.
then you're also being giving them a cold shoulder.
Yeah.
Just officially say, let's just not interact for now,
Mhm.
until we're ready to interact, and that way it's more like a mature thing to do, because part
Mhm.
of emotional intelligence is knowing how to express your emotions as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you don't know how to do it, because also I feel like sometimes when people give you silent treatment, and then like you're wondering, has it's happened to me before, in which you're like, what happened, what did I do wrong? Like, you don't know
Mm.
what you did wrong because they're not telling you what you did wrong, but someone
Exactly.
assumes that you know what you did wrong. And
Ex-
that's another thing for me that is part and parcel of emotional intelligence, is expressing your emotions, expressing what you're going through, and also realizing that you cannot just assume that so such and such is happening, or so and so knows what you're feeling, or so and so understands what you're going through, because we're different people, different experiences, maybe grew up differently. Even if it's your family member, you're still an individual. So
Mm.
if you assume that someone understands why you're feeling that way and you just react to them like, no, you should get why I'm feeling this way, it doesn't help. That's not assuming things, to me,
Mhm.
is part of my definition of being, is part of being emotionally intelligent. You know,
Mhm.
say, talk about what you're feeling in a proper manner, in a respectful manner. But also,
Mm.
don't just assume you know exactly what the other person's feeling or going through. Don't assume they're
Mhm.
going through the same thing you're going through, because that's where things start to get wrong. And I hate it when people like assume, like they're like, no, like you should get it. This is what's happening, and blah 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 blah. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, that's how you perceive this situation. That's how you got it. But for me, from my end, it didn't look the same.
Mhm. No, exactly. And unfortunately, there's a tendency for people to rally up a crowd, like a support group of their narrative of the situation. And so they have this backing, and in a way they're like, yeah, she should have understood. She should have understood where you're coming from. And and so that just feeds that emotion. It keeps feeding that emotion. It keeps growing. And I guess the resentment, the anger, whatever it is, the disappointment keeps growing and growing, because what they have just done is multiplied that emotion with five other people, with 10 other people. Because there are times when people will
Hmm.
share how they feel about something to their loved ones, but it only multiplies. It doesn't minimize the emotion, because they haven't directed that energy to the person that started the whole thing. And it's like,
Hmm.
you need to talk to the person that started the whole thing, or you need to revisit the situation. It might not be a person, it might be an event, or something that happened that triggered your past trauma or something, but you're not going to resolve it by telling a whole football stadium of what has happened. You, like, by broadcasting your emotion. And sometimes people think it's the problem gets solved in a way, but it doesn't.
Hmm.
And what you were talking about just reminded me of things like, if in the workplace where there are boundaries and where it's their policies and their laws, it just comes off in terms of like passive aggressiveness.
Hmm.
um and where you're just like, and the interesting part, I think, and it's very impressive, I don't know how God designed us, but it's pretty cool, is how you may, like, the thing with passive aggressiveness is that you don't even have to think about it. You can just feel it that someone doesn't like you, but they're showing it in a way that is just unnatural. I don't know. There's just something off. But then
Hmm.
you don't necessarily have the narrative to go with that emotion, but you just know that something is off.
Right. uh, but then also, that can fail us sometimes because
Mm,
it might all just be in your head.
that's true.
You you might honestly be like, that person is being passive aggressive to me, and they might just be simply being at their baseline,
Oh, yeah.
or like they don't know what's happening. This is why I think it becomes important to express your emotions in
Yeah.
a respectful manner, because yes, I do agree. Body language and um, reading the room and passive aggressiveness, those are things that can be they are valid, and you can learn. You can really pick up a lot from a person from it. But ultimately speaking, just talk. If you're talking to someone, if it's worth it, like if someone's being passive aggressive to you, and maybe it's a colleague and you like them, I mean not like them, but like you just want to know because you work
Mhm.
together, if it's worth it because you think it'll help your work relationship, just being like, hey, this is how I feel. Don't say I've noticed you are being passive aggressive. Say I
Mm.
feel like you're being passive aggressive, just because you never know, they might actually not be purposefully doing it. And
Mhm.
you know, again, that's where expressing comes into play, and you can at least get to the root cause of the problem. If
Mm.
possibly, I know it's not as simple as that all the time. I know
Mhm.
sometimes it's layers, or you might not be able to figure it out, but
Mhm.
it's a good step because again, you're it all goes back to assumptions. You're assuming they're being passive aggressive based off what you have experienced in the past, your life, your environment, and all that. But your
Mhm.
assumption may be wrong. I mean, who knows?
Yeah. And I think the maybe the thing we should talk about is negative emotions, because
Mhm.
I feel like people don't have a problem. Well, maybe some people might, but it's not it's not as big of a challenge to talk about positive emotions like
Right.
laughter, someone feeling happy, someone seeing someone dance and having a good time, a birthday party, like just the activities and the things that happen in our lives that just bring out the best sides, I guess, of us. But I think the thing the part that I've seen um challenges is with negative emotions,
Mm.
because um, even during even at work or in meetings, and I know these are professional, quote unquote professional settings, you you know like, at least for me, maybe because I've really spent time learning about myself. But you can see how people filter through their life when you ask them, "Oh, how was your weekend?" Or if they want to somehow share something about their life, they'll usually do so.
Mhm.
They usually give something that is funny or like is good, like, oh, like they'll be like, oh, we got a puppy um over the weekend. Oh, a puppy. But they're not going to express how, like, they're, I don't know, like something negative happening in their lives, or where they were disappointed and they probably cried for like 30 minutes and they sobbed over this thing. Some people try, maybe if it's something that is just common, but you'd
Mhm.
never really get to see the other side of that person, because I'm guessing people don't are sort of fearful of the negative emotions that they experience. Um,
Mhm.
and so maybe it's something worth talking about, to say, where did that come from? Um, and why are we so fearful of our negative emotions? I don't know if you have any
Mm.
thoughts on that.
Huh. I mean, when I think about that, I just think, in general, you're kind of made to feel like you're not supposed to have negative emotions. It's kind
Mm,
of like a, yeah, you're all supposed to be happy, and life is supposed to be, I don't know, happy go lucky. I mean, when
mhm,
it comes to positive emotion, it's maybe they're more the default than negative emotions. So you
mm,
kind of just guilted into not being aware of negative emotions. But I mean, for there to be a balance, there has to be positive and negative emotions.
mhm,
And negative emotions are part and parcel of us. They're part and parcel of our lives. And we need to embrace both of them. So it's fine to feel sad if the equation falls for you to the occasion or whatever happened is made you feel sad. I think it's just learning to embrace our emotions, whatever it may be. If you're angry at someone because someone did something that's worth being angry at them, embrace it.
mm,
But it's fine because it's a valid emotion. The only thing is that don't act on it without thinking through what you're going to do or how you're going to respond. That's
mhm,
where, like, if you're angry at someone, maybe the first thing in your mind would be punch them, but don't
mm,
act on it because that's wrong. You have to stop and be like, okay, it's fine for me to be angry with them, but it doesn't mean I have to punch them.
mhm,
We just have
yeah,
to learn how to accept the negative emotions, honestly, because it's kind of like, I don't know, if you think about kids, little kids,
mhm,
and when they just sit there crying, like they don't give it something and they just cry and cry and cry, and the parents just let them cry and cry and cry.
mhm.
And then after they're done crying, they kind of just like move on.
Yeah, they do. I know. It's so funny.
It's
It's
like they were let to simmer in their emotions, they were let to experience that negative emotion, and they
yeah.
experienced it wholeheartedly. And then after they're
Yeah.
done experiencing it, they moved on. So,
Exactly. No, I've seen that. I've seen that as well, where it's like the kid goes from crying and then they stop and then they start laughing at something and you're like, "Wait, what?"
mhm.
And it's so cool to see though. It's actually really really cool. But as you as you were talking about that, I was thinking, you know how, maybe even growing up, parents, when they see that sort of negative emotion in their child, they say, okay, we're gonna give you candy or some chocolate, or let's go get ice cream. Like they, and sometimes I wonder if it's the parent themselves who are not willing to see their child be sad. I don't know, like to go
Mm,
through that emotion. And so they come up with their
mhm,
own strategy to minimize that and say, okay, I'm going to get you this toy now, without really thinking through, like, why is this child expressing themselves like this in this particular moment? Uh,
mhm,
yeah, and I just wonder, because then people grow up thinking, like then I'm just wondering if people then grow up thinking when they're sad, they need to eat ice cream, they need to drink wine. I don't know. They need to buy new clothes, retail therapy. So I wonder if there's that correlation of, because of not handling negative emotions in the most appropriate way.
mm. Yeah, and I mean, what you said just, to me, what it made me think about is that this starts from childhood.
Mm,
It literally starts from childhood. Because if you feel like your parents allowed you to bask in your negative emotions in a controlled manner, again,
mm-hmm,
everything has to be in a controlled manner, because
mm-hmm,
there's some negative emotions you really need to control. Um, but you're allowed to experience them. You know, you might grow up being, it's fine. It's fine for me to be depressed every now and then. I will just sit down and, I feel like when you accept the emotion, you're actually able to now reason through it and understand why you're going through this emotion. That
Mm,
gives you room to really think through, why am I experiencing this emotion? And when you think about it, why you're experiencing an emotion, you can actually start working on how you can actually solve the problem. But if
mm,
you're not allowed to be sad, you just gloss over the problem
mm-hmm.
still exists, and
Yeah.
it will still rear its head in some form or way and force you to address it at some point. But it may be way worse when you have to do it or have more consequences. But if you just sit down and be like, "Okay, I'm sad. This happened to me today. This happened and just made me sad. Or I heard about this and it made me sad. This is why it made me sad. And then this
Mm-hmm.
is what I can do to make myself better." It seems
Mm.
so elemental. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it's so important. Um, I just think
Mm-hmm.
it's so important. Like, it's and it's just one of those things in life. Like, you, since we're at least we're talking about emotions, it's, you have to embrace the positive and the negative in life. It's the same thing. You have to embrace the positive and the negative. It's part of the ups and downs of life in general. And so, yeah.
Mm.
It's funny because we're really, it's, we're thinking about this and it's like a lot is going on in my head and I'm like, huh, we really have to, like, this is all part of just going through our emotions and just being able to. But that's why I keep on saying everything has to be in a controlled manner, because if you get uncontrolled, it starts to now affect other people or even yourself worse, and that's when it becomes an issue. And again, for me,
Mm-hmm.
that's my issue. I don't, when your emotions start to affect me and I
Mm-hmm.
have to control for that, I get really irritated because I'm like, no, it's your job to control your own
Yeah.
emotions. It's not my
Mm-hmm.
job to control your emotions. So it's, you know, yeah. I mean, I guess that's one
Yeah.
of my pet peeves.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
because I think because like for me, I think everything changed when it came to emotions when I'm trying to remember the lady, the author, I forget her name. I need to look her up, but when the way she said it, she said something along the lines that emotions are signals. They're just they're
mm,
signals. And so I went from thinking that emotions were, are creating my world to like signals. So like if I'm sad, like like it's a signal. You're sad. Why are you sad? This is why I think I'm sure maybe psychologists think through this stuff. Like if someone, like for example, if someone doesn't get upset or doesn't get sad from experiencing death, I'm sure there's a bit of like, okay, why aren't you upset? Like where are you putting those emotions? Because
mm,
maybe it's a natural reaction that you should be experience some level of like, I don't know whether it's fear, sadness, I don't know, but just something. Because this is why I think there are different um definitions in psychology of labeling someone based on, or maybe that's mental, on the mental side, but they're they're just basically they're signals, and when someone doesn't respond appropriately to a particular stimulus, it's there has to be there's something around that, like why haven't they responded to that
mm,
stimulus. And I think this is where, like, when people, especially maybe professionals, do this all the time, where they keep working and working and working, and they're like, oh, I'm fine, I'm a trooper, I can keep going and going and going. But somehow the body keeps score, and yeah,
right.
you know what I mean. And then like you didn't express your tiredness or you didn't express your sadness that day, but it will come out like 2 years from now, and like then all of a sudden someone just starts breaking down and crying, and you're like, what are you like, what's going on? um so I think for me it's just like, yeah, the if emotions are signals, and I think people don't look at them that way. I think they look at them as like, my body said I need to be angry, and I should just be angry. Um, but then it's, why are you
You
angry? Um,
need to be think a little bit deeper, not surface level. Why are you angry?
yeah, no, exactly. And the other thing about this stuff is growing up in different cultural contexts.
Mhm.
Because I was just thinking how maybe doing a particular thing, I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example here. Um, Maybe let's say how I greet people in Zambia would be looked at differently in the United States. So like, well, maybe
Mhm.
maybe you can talk of an example of like older people. Uh, in Zambia, if I called a person that's older than me, I think there's this concept of respect. I call somebody who's
Mhm.
older than me by their first name. They might look at me and be like, "Oh my goodness, sorry. Can't you tell that I'm not your age, young lady?" You know. And then in the you know, like it's like I would get in trouble, right? And they would give me
Mhm.
this angry look, and then I do the same thing to an older person in the US, and they might even say like, "Hey honey, hi sweetheart." And it's just like, so there's that. So there are people, so people are also taught culturally how to respond to
Mhm.
certain things. And so there's also that cultural component to it. Um
Mhm.
so yeah, it runs deep, this idea of being emotionally intelligent. And so uh, yeah, and I think that's where I am very grateful for my travels, because being put in different contexts has helped me realize how different cultures respond to things, and then I'm able to then respond appropriately and not try to offend someone as best as I can, obviously.
And obviously, I mean, as you said, it helps you realize how different cultures respond to things, but you might not even know how they respond to things. So it gives you the grace to handle an awkward situation when it shows up, because you did not realize that that's what was the meaning behind X, Y, and Z. And so it
Mm,
helps you just approach it with a little bit more of maturity and more calmness, because you're like, okay, you know what? This is what I meant, and this is how I'm going to handle my emotions in this and that way, because you realize you don't know everything. So this is why managing emotions is so important, because like life can throw you so many different things in different ways. And if you're not emotionally intelligent to handle what gets thrown at you, particularly when it's a curveball that you did not see coming your way,
mm-hmm,
I, like how are you going to be how are you going to how are you going to handle it? How is it going to leave you? You know, it just ends up, I feel like this is where people just get shortchanged in life. And some
mm,
people might might hear the word emotional intelligence and roll their eyes, but don't realize how it hits in every stage of life. But I mean, we can keep talking. This is one of those topics which is just like a deep topic where you like have some tea or some wine and just keep going and going and going. But
mm,
hey, let's leave some practical tips. How can you practice emotional intelligence? So one of the
mm,
ways is being able to accept criticism and responsibility. um,
mm,
Another way is being able to move on after making a mistake. I'm assuming that is after you've realized why you made the mistake and all that.
mm-hmm,
Um, uh, Being able to say no when you need to,
mm,
being able to share your feelings with others. So it's funny because I think both our unlearnings were just touched on with those two statements.
mm-hmm,
Um, being able to solve problems in ways that work for everyone,
Mhm.
having empathy for other people, having great listening skills, knowing why you do the things you do, and lastly, but very important, in my opinion, is not being judgmental of others. Um,
Mm.
I think that's how emotional intelligence helps because you just realize you just don't, when you stop to think, surface level and quote unquote whatever you consider common sense might not necessarily become common sense. And you realize there might be a different angle to this situation.
Yeah. And I think it may be harder and challenging with developing this skill, unlike, let's say, so with something physical like weight. Because I've read stories where like let's say somebody was overweight and they went on the journey to become to have a normal, or yeah, a better weight rather. um they usually will say something like, I was at a party and they took pictures of me and my friends, and I couldn't recognize the person that was in the photo, or I couldn't believe that, yeah, I had gained that much weight. Or they look at the scale, um but and then they see their weight and they're like, wow, I'm just way more than I used to be. And so they start to change, or something triggers in them and they start to make changes. But that's seems a little bit easier than emotional intelligence, because what from the tips that you have given, there's an idea of having to mirror yourself, like if
Mhm.
someone says something where it says like, the way you acted yesterday or the way you responded to this yesterday was not good, there's almost that trigger of like, I need to defend myself. Like, what do you mean, what did I do? But then, as you said, you have to accept criticism. um that's hard. It can be hard because you're naturally trying to
Mhm.
defend yourself. But this is why I think I would recommend counseling or some sort of therapy where the person is neutral. Because sometimes if it's a friend or a loved one or somebody close to you that's giving you that feedback, you might
Mhm.
I don't know, I'm just thinking that your mind can come up with a narrative that's like, oh, they just don't like me, or they don't want to see me succeed, or I don't know, just other stories that might come up, and then
Mhm.
make you want to keep repeating the pattern. um so because that's really is someone being able to tell you like, no, why are you thinking like that, why do you think like that? um and that can be hard if there's nobody to give you that feedback.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And that brings us to the end of this deep thinking emotional intelligence episode. I
Oh.
hope our listeners have learned something about it. Let us know what's your journey with emotional intelligence. What do you think
Mm-hmm.
about emotional intelligence? We'd be really curious to know what you think, interact with you. We're on all major podcast platforms, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it, we're on it. Um, you can also, interact with us with there's I believe on Spotify there's a place to say send us a text message and we'll get, your message. You can email us on the feminineatliers@gmail.com as well. You can write in the comment section on YouTube. We will review it. We'll respond to you as well. Um, Again, I mean, as we're just trying to continue to build a community and interact with you, our followers. So, yeah, and feel free to like, subscribe, share it, with everyone who you think would benefit from it. And yeah, so thank you guys for listening to another episode. Until
Yeah.
next time, have fun, live large, and don't be afraid to be an outlier.